Okay, what could she do? And so everybody was thinking, well, our laboratory management didn't think it was as neat as I did, but I talked to the gentleman named Ray Durant. I was not sure whether you pronounced the last syllable of his name or not. Durant. Yeah. Well, he hired this food safety shop. Apparently sort of a independently wealthy gentleman that was retired and decided to make this shop. And he's got a lot. Oh, yeah. He's never been a turning up educated himself in the area. He knows how to size up. So we have our own set up. I know which one they should use.
Oh, you mean the other office? I thought you were going to move that together. You say you're going to put somebody in my office and you'll be not in your office. I don't have a string, but I'll be part of that thing. So that's your office. Hey, no, it is. We can answer a lot of in our field,
a lot that won't even begin. How's that?
Okay.
Okay, let's begin. Let me have your attention, please. Let's begin. Our electronics is on, and I understand from the guru over here that it is working. So let me welcome you to the University of Tennessee Nuclear Engineering Department Seminar Series. Today's speaker is Dr. Draughon, who is a professor of food microbiology and toxicology at the University of Tennessee, and received her BS and MS at the University of Tennessee, and then left and went to the University of Georgia, where she got her PhD in 1979, and then she came back to the University of Tennessee and joined the faculty as an assistant professor. She's been here for the past 21 years, rising from assistant to associate to full professor. And more recently, she is one of the few people at this university who received funding from one of the so-called large centers of excellence. It's a multi-million-dollar funding program as a result of our new president, Wade Gillick. She is the director of that center. It's called the Food Safety Center of Excellence. The subject of her presentation today is the new Food Safety Center of Excellence, Opportunities for Funding and Collaboration. And welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Dodds, for inviting me. And I'd also like to thank Savannah Evans and Ron Peavy, who introduced me to the field of nuclear engineering, because generally biologists are not very good engineers. Now, I suppose engineers are not really very good biologists generally, so sometimes we have a little bit of difficulty communicating. So that's been my challenge as the center director, and also during the last couple of years, is to learn the language of my colleagues in the engineering sciences, and also in physics and in electrical engineering, because we have projects with them on plasma and how it affects the destruction of bacteria and food products. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the new Center of Excellence. I may tell you more than you want to know about it, but one of the things that I've discovered that's not really available is what are people going to do with the money exactly? How is it going to be distributed? Are you going to keep it all? I wish. We have a very unique approach to the way we're going to handle our center compared to many of the others. Most of them are going to be spending that funding on very large pieces of equipment, on equipping new professors who might be coming in as far as setting them up with the supplies they need. And others may be directed toward maybe just one outstanding individual and building their program. We've taken a very different approach, and I'd like to try and explain what we're doing. I'd like to also recognize my co-director, Stephen Oliver. He and I are a tag team. One of us does the job usually, and whoever gets tagged, we nominate the other one to do it. But this time I got to do it because I wanted to. So let's see if we are going to move here. I thought I'd put this one in to start with. The reason that I'm interested in food irradiation and in nuclear engineering is because I've got a lot of food companies that are being sued. Last year, Sara Lee was sued for they were sued for a lot more than $31 million, but that's what they ended up having to pay, was $31 million in claims and liabilities. That was one recall. We had hundreds of recalls of food products last year because of various types of foodborne pathogens. And you don't hear about a lot of this on the news except for the initial outbreak, because companies prefer to settle out of court. And when you settle out of court, part of the settlement is you don't talk about it. So I wasn't involved, so I can talk all I want to on this one. I wasn't involved in a court case. But it's the people that died in the case, they were awarded up to $7 million in wrongful death suits. And then those people that were injured, they just got sick from this organism and had to go to the doctor or to the hospital. They ended up with $50,000. So I guess that's the one way to finance your college education. You get really, really desperate. But I call it the Hall of Blame, not the Hall of Fame or even the Hall of Shame. Because the fact is that this organism that caused all this loss, Listeria, has been in food since before I was born. It's been there forever. It's been making people sick forever, and it's only been the last 5 to 10 years that we can find that organism, identify it, and blame it on someone. So now we got the Hall of Blame. And the reason that we're so interested in getting these organisms out of food, I care about the people. That's why I'm a teacher and I'm a professor and a researcher. I investigate food safety because I care about people's health. I'm a frustrated doctor, I guess. But the problem with food companies is they don't do this out of the kindness of their hearts. They do it because the bottom line is dollars. Once you have a $31 million award against you, it's going to be hard to make a profit that year. Even with the stock market where it was last year, Sarah Lee still hurt pretty badly. So these people up here, I don't think that you should be afraid to eat there. I just think maybe they should be sympathized with at this point because they have paid for our development of knowledge. And it's going to continue happening, and that's why we've got to make our food supply a little bit safer. There's some other reasons, too, that I'd like to talk about because I think we do need a safer food supply. The vision of our Food Safety Center of Excellence is to be the leader, both nationally and internationally, in discovery research and also in communication of the findings of that research to the world at large. So we have a pretty big vision, and the first thing that I did was to set up our web page. Now, it's not perfect yet, but I do have the address in case you want to check it out. But please give me a little bit more time. I've only had about 3 weeks to set up a whole web page. It's about 7 or 8 pages at this point. Our second part of our vision is to significantly impact the development of new technology and economic development related to food safety. Because the reason in our field for our existence is really to train people and to do research that makes the food industry profitable. It's one of the biggest economic factors in this country as far as our gross national product. Our people get paid well. They go out with PhDs at about 75. They go out with master's degrees at 45, 50, 60, depending on their abilities. To get paid, they're like you guys, they have to be able to do their job. And doing our job means finding ways to keep the food supply safe. You're in charge of that program for a company and you have a $31 million lawsuit, I would be sending out resumes. It would not be a good job recommendation for you. So what we want to do is to develop all types of new technologies. Irradiation is not a new technology, but the application of the way we want to use it is new. Sonication is not a new technology, but the fact that we want to use sonication to kill bacteria, that's sort of new. Electricity is not new, but using a high electron voltage to kill bacteria in a juice product, that's sort of new. So what we do is take technologies and then apply them in different ways. And to do that, we have to have engineers. Because, like I said, I'm a biologist. I can't do an integral. I hated calculus. I love my bacteria. Now, the goals of our center are, first of all, to reduce the occurrence of foodborne illness. And second, we want to find ways to destroy or inactivate these bacterial pathogens. Pathogens are bacteria that cause disease. And we want to limit antimicrobial resistance of bacteria that cause disease because we've got a big, big problem right now in hospitals that someone goes in for a gallbladder operation, they come out in a box because they've developed some kind of an infection at the hospital that they can't do anything about. Something that has nothing to do with gallbladder operations. About 10% of patients in hospitals develop some type of an infection while they're in the hospital. So that's a serious problem, and it's hard to treat these bacteria because they're resistant to all of our antibiotics that we have today. One problem that's causing that is the fact that we do feed a lot of antibiotics to cattle, to animals. But we don't know how significant that effect is. Is that more important than the fact that doctors give us an antibiotic every time we get our nose run? You know, what's more important, the human side or the animal side? So that's what some of our scientists are looking at is some of the molecular effects, the genetic level, looking at exactly which targets in genetic foci are being affected by antibiotic resistance markers. We want to actually reduce pathogens in animals and in plants and in the environment. And trying to clean up the environment is a big, big job. So to that, we've gone to our agricultural engineers and our plant scientists, and also to the people at Oak Ridge who have been doing this for 35 or 40 or almost 50 years, I guess, in some ways. They've been trying to clean up the environment in that area. So they have a lot of expertise that we don't have on the environmental side. The other thing here is also breeding animals that are disease resistant or genetically engineering those animals. We have a proposal in right now to genetically engineer cows that are resistant to mastitis. You probably read about our Millie, our baby cow that was cloned the first year she was born. She's the only one right now that survived so far of those three that came to term. What they'd like to do is to be able to take animals that are disease resistant and then actually clone those and have a bunch of Millies that are all healthy Millies. Weird stuff. And finally, the fifth thing is education. And I firmly believe that the whole problem with food safety is the fact that people don't know how to handle food. The bacteria that we want to kill with the radiation should be killed by people cooking the food, or by them handling the foods properly and not contaminating their cooked food with raw food. The problem is, though, that people can't do that. And we also increasingly rely on other people to handle our food. And do you want to trust somebody else to handle that food if you don't know how careful they're going to be, especially if it's a small child, or if you're an old person, or maybe you are being under treatment for cancer or something that means that your body is really sensitive to anything that you might get. So that's the problem that we've got with our foods, is that people really don't know how to handle foods properly. They don't know how to cook them properly. Even if they do, they don't care sometimes. They get in a hurry like I do and throw them on the grill and take them off before they're done because you're tired and you want to eat. And, I mean, we're human. We all are. So that's the problem, and that's why we probably are going to have to go that extra step to totally get some of these bacteria out of food products. And irradiation is one of the ways we can do that. The administrative structure of the Centers of Excellence is kind of a question that a lot of people ask about. Can everybody see my slides okay? I don't need some. Is that better? It's an interesting structure because we answer directly to Dr. Gilley through Dr. McKay's office, the Vice President for Grants and Contracts. And so they tell us what they want. What they want is for us to give them $4 back for every dollar they give us. So if they give us $5 million, then they want back 20. Plus 5 that they gave us, of course. So that's what the return is expected on the Centers of Excellence, which is a pretty significant return. So you can see why we've already submitted $6 million in grant proposals in the first 6 weeks of this year. Just a few of us that's involved, because we've got to really work hard. And then all of our collaborators, I didn't draw an arrow because we're all working together here, and then they have to answer to their department heads. We all have a boss, or many bosses. But everybody on faculty belongs to some department, so they have to also clear things to the department head. But our money comes straight from above. I've got the web page address a little bit later for you, so you can look at it if you like. Right now we have 35 faculty involved in this Food Safety Center of Excellence. These faculty represent a number of colleges. We have people from engineering, the engineering colleges. We have people from liberal arts and microbiology and geography and so forth. We have people in our human ecology, and then we have people in agriculture. And I forgot to left out my college of veterinary medicine. I'm very sorry about that. They're very important to this effort. So we have a lot of colleges of faculty involved here. We also have a number of colleagues from ORNL, and we want more. And some of those colleagues would like to offer partial faculty appointments within, like joint appointments between UT and Oak Ridge. They would actually have to be a part of the department, just like any other faculty member. So we do have funds in our budget for that. So in this group of people, we have an incredible range of expertise. Everything from people who do robotics and molecular microbiology and molecular biology to people who work with cow manure and swine manure and people who do engineering, electrical engineering, people in geography who do the cartography and draw the maps with all the software programs. Just a very, very broad spectrum of things. We also have scientists from Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta and the U.S. Department of Agriculture research centers. We have FDA research scientists. And then we also have people at the Tennessee Department of Public Health, which is located in Nashville. They're the ones that the outbreak. And then we also have people from the Tennessee Department of Agriculture who are responsible for the safety of the foods of Tennessee. So this is the way the funding breakdown works. We split our budget up into 5 years. This first year we're going to spend $1.4 million. Of that, we're going to put $743,000 into seed money. That's going to be divided into $40,000 grant proposals that will be available to collaboratively proposed research that involves some aspect of food safety. And then we'll have a bunch of $10,000 projects which individual scientists can apply for if it's a smaller type, a more limited study. What we're trying to do is generate seed money for grants or seed data, because without preliminary data in our grants and contracts, it's almost impossible these days to get funded. And this is not an area where a lot of people have done a lot of work. So we need that preliminary data. The thing is that when you get the money, you're very accountable for it. You get $40,000, we expect $160 back. And they expect us to do publications, and so forth. It goes with it. Or the trough will be dry when you come back the next time. So if you take money and you don't do much with it, then chances of getting more money is going to be very small. We're going to have PhD stipends. Those are very few. This is for 6 months, and we're going to be matching those. So a researcher comes up with half, and the center comes up with half. And again, these have to be focused on some aspect of food safety research. Same thing with postdocs. We're going to match those. So if the researcher comes up with half the money for a postdoc, then we'll match it. So that we don't have a bunch of people getting free rides. It's the people that are already productive and are willing to write and get money that will be able to take advantage of the center. Space modifications, we need $150,000 for that. Equipment for this first year, about $115,000, and then administrative will be $100,000. And then marketing, which is going to be a fairly important thing this first year, and our contingency fund will be $75,000. And $1.4 million is gone. It seems like so much money at the time, but that's the way it'll be spent. Now, in the second year, you can see that seed money is going down because we're hoping that more people will have funding at that point. And stipends have gone up, and our postdocs have gone up to $355,000. So we'll have enough funds there to match quite a few postdocs within the center. These will be available competitively depending on first come, first served, who has the grants and who has the funds to do the work. Space modifications, a small amount, and also for equipment, primarily maintenance. Administrative will be the same, and then our contingency and marketing fund will be the same. And then in this second year, we'd like to start trying to get some of our Oak Ridge positions matched. Perhaps, 1 or 2 positions. And we also may share with other centers. If you look at all 5 years, this spends every bit of $5 million, and you see that the majority of it, $2 million of it has gone to seed money, and about $1.3 million has gone to postdocs, and then small amounts to other categories. For our Oak Ridge colleagues, we've put in $328,000. In our original proposal, we had $2 million in there for our Oak Ridge connection, but the original proposal was for $12 million, and then everybody, of course, you always get less than you ask for, so you cut everything back. But that's the funding situation for that. Anybody have questions about that at this point? And this is the matching, just very quickly. So in year 1, we only have to come up with a 0.5 to 1 match. So this year, we only have to come up with $500,000. This is above what we've been making in the past. which was a little bit more difficult because already we were, above the $1 million range at that point. And then by the 5th year, we're coming up with a 6-to-1 match compared to what the center is giving us. We think it's a realistic estimate because I believe we could almost meet it at this point with a few other large grants coming in. So we don't feel that we have any problems in meeting this. What we want to see is to grow even faster than what we're projecting. Performance metrics. This means what do we have to show that we're doing in order to keep getting money for the center. Obviously, we have to show that we're submitting grants and contracts, that we're trying to get gifts, we're trying to do a lot of things with industry to get donations because we can count those. Publications they'll be counting those, other creative achievements, patents, and so forth. The awards that the people in the center receive, the outreach and education impacts, don't ask me to define that, and university appointment of research faculty. And we think that Oak Ridge connection is a very important one. That's why we included it in our metrics. If we don't build this collegiality with our Oak Ridge colleagues, then we're losing all that expertise and knowledge there. And that would be a real shame. So as far as management of grants and contracts, this has been really a sticky thing to deal with. The office that will handle that will be myself and Steve, and we're in the Institute of Agriculture, but this, of course, actually reports directly to UTK. And our grants and contracts office that will handle this will be at this location in the future, rather than trying to take it through the grants and contracts office through Dr. McKay's office. The problem is that many of the agricultural grants that we may end up applying for, and some of the EPA ones, are pretty tricky. And you have to have a lot of background in order to be able to process those properly without getting into a lot of difficulties. So we decided to handle those in that way. The other reason is a more practical one. We will have a new administrative position in the center, and I've been told as of yesterday, we were calling it an administrative assistant, but they're going through a new description of titles here at the university. So we no longer have an administrative assistant, we have a budget coordinator. So that's who we'll be working with, is a budget coordinator. Whatever he or she does, they're going to be the facilitator for all the PIs within the center. They're going to be the go-to, they're going to run and pick up proposals, they're going to fill out all the paperwork that needs to get done, they'll do tracking forms, they'll try to make our life a little bit easier. And finally, the indirect cost breakdown. Our initial indication from Dr. McKay was that the center would get 12.5% of the indirect cost, period, and that he would take 75% and that he would give the college 12.5%. And that didn't seem enough to make it worthwhile for many of our PIs. And so what we've done is to ask them to give us 35%, and we're giving half of that back to the PIs, which will be about 17.5% of their indirect costs. And then the PIs have to work out among themselves how they distribute that. Our goals as directors are to provide the resources that faculty who are interested need to be successful. So we're going to make that administrative assistant, budget coordinator person available. We're going to keep resumes and things constantly there at the office, all the formats where they can revise them for us so that they can make our life a lot simpler and hopefully expedite this granting process. The hardest part is those forms sometimes. The easiest part to me is putting together the science. I really despise doing all the nitpicky little forms. So we're going to try to get that part done so that we don't have to fool with them. We'd like to see more of our doctoral students applying for the doctoral type grants. I know that you all do that a lot already. Our students don't generally. And we want to see our postdocs and our doctoral students writing a lot more grants because there's lots of money out there that's available for safety right now. We're looking for aggressive grantsmanship, for productivity and accountability, and for collaboration, because that's the name of the game in research today. The Lone Ranger is no longer a viable model, I guess, for research. You're very ineffective frequently in competing for dollars unless you have an outstanding track record when you apply by yourself for most granting agencies. And the other thing that we're looking for is a dynamic intellectual environment, because one thing that many of us have missed over the years is that ability to interact with our colleagues in a stimulating way. And to be perfectly honest, that's one of the reasons I came to the university to start with, was to have that kind of interaction. And sometimes it gets buried in the miasma of all the other responsibilities that we have. So that's one of the things that we're trying to achieve. So what does nuclear engineering have to do with food safety? Well, I hope that all of y'all know the answer to that at this point. Foodborne illness is a major cause of acute illness and also chronic illness in the United States. And our traditional methods of food production and processing do not ensure the safety of our foods. I'd like to tell you that they do. And I do tell you that we have the safest food supply in this country of any country in the world, or in the history of the world. But I can't tell you that our food supply is perfectly safe, because it's not. It's as safe as we have been able to make it with existing technology. And as far as this business of acute illness and chronic illness, acute is getting sick, throwing up, having diarrhea. Chronic is waking up a month later and not able to move your legs because you've developed a Guillain-Barré after having a campylobacteriosis infection, which is a very common side effect of that. Or it's waking up 6 months later with your knee swollen 3 times its normal size with reactive arthritis because the bacterium that was in your stomach or in your gut migrated into your joint. And now you've got arthritis because of that, also called Reiter's syndrome sometimes. So those are serious problems that most people don't even think about when they get sick and throw up and have diarrhea. All you do is run for the Imodium and hopefully feel better in a couple of days. We don't think about these other lifelong problems that may pop up later. And that, to me, is probably one of the most serious problems with foodborne illnesses. Because chronic illnesses take a lot from us financially. The reason I want to irradiate food is to kill disease-causing bacteria or microorganisms such as Salmonella, E. coli 0157, which some people call the hamburger bacterium, the one that children get, that terrible kidney disease called HUS, many diseases. And then there's Listeria, which is the biggest problem economically. That's the one that causes all the recalls, pretty much. And it's a problem also because the fatality rate with women who are pregnant is very high. If a woman in her last trimester of pregnancy gets listeriosis, there's about a 95% probability that she's going to lose a baby. And that's a very serious problem. It's a very emotional one. There's lots of things on the internet, a lot of groups that are very emotional about these things. If you ever want to look at one called Safe Tables Our Priority. The acronym is STOP. These are very inflammatory, and but imagine your own self in a position where you lost a 3-year-old child because they went and had a McDonald's at a fast food restaurant. Perfectly normal, healthy child today and dead tomorrow. And how you feel. You know, the normal reaction anybody wants is to blame somebody. I mean, you don't want to believe anything's going to happen without it being somebody's fault. So that's why these things come up. And as a scientist, I look at them and sometimes I sort of smile at the naivety. But on the other hand, as a mother and as a human being, I sympathize with that. Because I know how I would feel if one of my sons died. The other problem is that we had about 9,000 people die last year. We had about 50 million people got sick from foodborne illness. Some of you were probably one of those. You probably just had some diarrhea or some nausea for a few days. Didn't probably slow you down. But we lose billions of dollars in hospital and doctor bills, lost work, health complications annually. And that's not even with all the legal issues involved and all the liability. So we got big bucks involved. That's why food companies are willing to put up money to support this. The legislators, when I testified before Congress, before one of the congressional committees, the question was, why is these bacteria in food start with? Why don't y'all get them out? What are these things doing in our food? But I try to explain to them that we are hosts for these bacteria. Billions of them live in our bodies. I mean, basically, we're a planet of bacterium in each of us ourselves. And Without those bacteria, we can't live because for us, they're essential to life. Without the bacteria that are in our intestines, we would be vitamin deficient, and they make vitamins for us. And so they do a lot of other things for us too, as far as helping to digest food. But the idea of a sterile human being or a sterile animal is not compatible with nature. So that's just not going to happen. And so I don't know if I'm convincing him at all. Then they tell me, well, why don't you just get rid of the bad ones? And the trouble is that the bad ones are a lot like the good ones. I mean, it's hard to tell the difference most of the time. And so the smallest difference may turn a bad one from a good one. And so it's not that easy to get all of them out of there. The other problem that we've got is that we animals on this planet are pretty nasty creatures, and we generate a lot of waste. And we humans generate a lot of waste. Of course, it goes down to the sewage treatment plant, hopefully, or to your septic tank if you're further out in the country. And with animals, we have billions of metric tons of manure generated each year. Billions and billions and billions of metric tons, which is a lot of manure. And so the other question the legislators had for me was, why don't we just get rid of this manure? Why don't you burn it? Well, that's a good solution for air quality. But that manure is a very valuable resource because it's an excellent source of nitrogen that you have to put back into the soil. If you try to not use manure and just use artificial chemicals for fertilizers, the cost of our food would go up astronomically. You'd be paying, $50 a pound per steak, because you have to pay for the input into producing that crop. So using manure is a very cost-effective way of handling it, but it's also a very natural way, I think, and a very economically and environmentally friendly way. But we don't do a good job of it. So that's what I'm talking to people about over in plant and soil science and animal science, is trying to get them together with more technology to figure out how to solve this problem from a technological perspective. Not to say, it's just a bunch of manure, we can't do anything about it. That's just not the way scientists deal with problems. The other question I get sometimes is, are we trying to make food too safe? Have you seen on the news that they've talked about that the problem with our kids is that we're giving them too many vaccines, and we've got a national epidemic of asthma occurring in our young children. Just incredible statistics on how many kids have asthma now. And they're blaming it on the fact that they don't get a good dose of bacterial diseases while they're in childhood. That every time they get sick, we run them to the doctor and treat them with antibiotics. And that we vaccinate them against all these terrible diseases like whooping cough and measles now, mumps, there's chicken pox. But anyone who's had whooping cough will tell you that they would much rather have that terrible vaccine than have the disease. And another immunization that we're using is the one for diphtheria. And that was a major killer of children up until the time that we had vaccines for those. So I am no advocate of going away from medical care in order to go back closer to nature. Because there was a time when you'd have 10 children and you could count on maybe 6 of them dying of some kind of childhood illness. And we've pretty much overcome that. We don't see polio. We don't see smallpox. I've not seen a case of diphtheria since I was a child. And these are really horrible, terrible diseases. The same thing I think is true with food safety. Saying that food is so safe and we're getting sicker because of it, to me, does not make sense. It just doesn't make sense. We get exposed to plenty of bacteria. Our bodies are already a host of bacteria. So what if we're missing out on a few that we've taken out of food? There's no logic to that. I think what's changing is that we have the healthiest population right now and the most long-lived population in the history of the world. My life expectancy in 1900 was 44 years of age. I would probably be dead by now, or at least in a lot worse shape than I am. But in this lifetime, my life expectancy is about 87. Maybe going to die or something, but But this is a difficult problem because as we get older, our bodies are much less efficient at fighting disease. We don't do anything as well. I mean, we don't metabolize food as well. Everything starts to wear out. I mean, the eyes go, joints go, eventually about everything goes. But the problem is that we have a lot of people that are living to be 85 to 90 years of age, or even 70 and 60 that wouldn't have lived 50 years ago. And these people are at very high risk for developing foodborne illness because their bodies are just not as strong as those of younger people. So it increases the statistics that more people are getting sick because there's more people reported being sick, and there might be more people dying because as we get older, our illnesses tend to be more serious. Now, the demographics in this country are kind of interesting. What is it, that 25% of our population will be over 65 years of age in 2010? Is that what it is? A fourth of our population is going to be over 65 years of age in less than 10 years. That's a lot of old people. I'll be one of them, I hope. And so the problem is, though, we've got this constantly growing population. And not only do we have the elderly population, but how many more people now are surviving cancer and leukemia? All these life-threatening diseases that once were a death sentence, and now we have a 97% survival rate. And many types of leukemia now are totally treatable. But the problem with treating disease is that we often give people drugs that impair their ability to fight other diseases. So if you're on treatment for cancer, then you're more susceptible to foodborne illness. If a person has AIDS, they're much more susceptible to foodborne illness. If somebody's been in a car wreck and had their spleen taken out, that's where you build the building blocks of your immunity for your body. If you've ever had your spleen taken out, you're more at risk for foodborne illness. And then look at all the people who are getting organ transplants. They have to take drugs for the rest of their lives to suppress their body's ability to fight off anything, which means they don't fight disease well either. But would you not want to be in one of those surviving groups just because the risk of foodborne illness is higher? And so that's the population as a food industry that we're dealing with. The very changing demographics, changing from a much younger type of population, a much hardier population, to a population with lots of people with chronic illnesses, lots of diabetics, lots of people surviving cancer, and lots of people with organ transplants, and a large percentage of our population over 65 years of age. And we still are responsible for the safety of those people. So if the food supply 20 years from now is just as safe as it is today, we're going to have a lot more people dying. Because those people in that time period are going to be less able to fight off the illness. And trying to keep food safe, there's about 50,000 items in a typical grocery store, and a lot of those are candidates for causing foodborne illness. What we want as consumers is longer shelf lives. We want to put something in our refrigerator and keep it until we run out of it before it spoils. That gives bacteria time to grow under refrigeration. So the bacteria that normally wouldn't cause us any problems, when they sit there for 4 weeks, they can grow to pretty high levels and cause us to get sick sometimes. So that's a problem that we need to deal with. Everybody wants something fresh. Everything is fresh vegetables and fresh this and sushi, which I wouldn't touch with a mile away. And our other problem is that consumers often abuse foods. My kids will take and set a gallon of milk out on the TV table where we eat all of our meals, and it may be out there 3 hours from now if I don't come down and remind them. And everybody does this, I think, to a certain extent. People drive around with meat in their car. They take the kids to baseball practice. They take the little girl to ballet practice. They forget that they left something at work, and they go back and get it. And 3 hours later, they put it in the refrigerator. It's human. Humans do that. So you have to plan for that as an industry, because they can still sue you. If somebody gets sick from your product, it doesn't matter if they kept it in their trunk for 2 weeks. If they can show that the bacteria in that product was the same that made them sick, they can get some money. So what methods are we using currently to make food safer? Well, just very briefly, we're pasteurizing using lots of different processes. We're using high heat processing, that's with pressure and steam. We're using antimicrobials. These are chemicals that we can add to food that prevent bacteria from growing. We use freezing, we use drying, we use pickling, we use smoking. We sanitize like crazy in those food plants with every imaginable sanitizer and cleanser known to man. We use ozone, which is a very nice sanitizer, but it inactivates pretty quickly. We use some of the other things I talked about, high voltage. We use UV, high pressure, or hyperbaric treatments. It's not enough. We need irradiation. When I first began talking with Dan about this, he said, "Oh, it's easy. Just irradiate it with gamma." And it would simply be a simple process, wouldn't it? I mean, just think that with gamma, it's cheap. We use cobalt-60 or cesium-137, nuclear waste materials. And our problems are solved. Well, there's some problems with using gamma. Now, some of the plants are successfully using gamma irradiation for foods. And these are usually plants that have contracts with a great big food processor or somebody that makes millions and billions of pounds of hamburger patties every week. Like the company that makes the hamburger patties for McDonald's. It's very economically feasible when you have billions of pounds of meat-forming hamburger patties to run those through a gamma irradiator, even if you have to take them to a different location. But if you have hundreds of thousands of small plants spread all over the country trying to run through one or a few gamma irradiators, it's not going to work. The other problem that we've got is that these small food processing plants are just not set up to move this product in and out of any type of centralized facilities, even if they were available. What they want is something that they can use in-house. And just imagine all Homer Simpsons in those little tiny mom-and-pop plants, monitoring a nuclear source and taking it home for safekeeping at night. The other problem we have is space, is because many of our food processing plants are in metropolitan areas. They have no extra space around them. And if you want to build a gamma operating plant or a gamma irradiation food plant, you're going to need a building. And so there's just not space to put these facilities in, even with big companies that could probably afford it. The other thing I alluded to is the education level of workers. The people who work in the food plants. Now, the management people are well educated, and the research people, but the people that just do the average everyday work in the plant may have a high school degree. A lot of them don't even have a high school degree. So you're dealing with a population there that's very difficult to train them in nuclear safety. The other thing that we have with gamma plants is that the cheapest that the food plants run right now is $6 to $10 million. And BioSterile told me they could do one for $4 million. But that's a lot of money for a mom-and-pop operation. Their total sales might be $80,000 a year of product, and that's gross. Their income might be $25,000 a year as a family. So we're talking about lots and lots of small plants like that all over this country. I mean, hundreds of thousands of small plants. And the education level of those people is frequently high school also. Many of those don't have college degrees. So what do we do? Then Dan told me about x-rays. He says, well, can't do gamma, let's do x-rays. They got lots of power. And this will do a really good job for you. But what we found out was that they're too inefficient for our process. And only about 10% of the energy you use is going to be converted. And the other problem is that it's just too expensive. Food is cheap. So you got to do something with food that doesn't raise the price very much. So x-rays for right now are out, unless you guys can figure out some way to make it cost-effective. The advantages of E-beam, which we are calling electronic pasteurization, not irradiation, because consumers don't like radiation. So we're going to change the acronym of this to electronic pasteurization. Doesn't that sound much healthier? With the advent of these little self-contained units, which are capable of doing caffeine processing, we finally have something that will work for many mid-sized small plants. These units are about 8 by 11 feet, which is about the size of my office. So that's a pretty good size. I mean, it's not huge, and it would fit in a processing plant in an industrial setting very readily at the end of a processing line. So this might work for us. It's totally self-shielded, self-contained. It cost about $500,000. Again, that's a capital investment that you could probably stand, even for a mid-sized company. They have an on and off switch, which I really like. I mean, X-ray would too, but at least this one I can cut off if I went home and cut it back on if I want to process, and I don't have to worry about somebody taking the source with them. The other advantage that I see is the NRC is not involved, because these are licensed at the state level. NRC has nothing to do with them. And so those are some of the advantages of using an EV. Now the problem with this is 5 MeV, which is a fairly low power. You go up to 10 MeV, you're going to have all the same problems you have with gamma. The power gets too high there, and so you have large amounts of shielding are involved. You're going to have a building. But this, you can have multiple ones at ends of processing lines. That's why I think they offer so much promise for food industry. This is what one looks like. I walked through one at Iowa State. Basically, you just simply put the product on a little conveyor, runs it through the machine, and then out the other side, and then you package it just like you would at the end of any processing line. So it's just one more unit operation in a typical food process. Food engineers like unit operation, so it's okay to add one unit operation, and they feel comfortable with that. Will it cost? Well, what will it cost? With this type of setup, it costs about 5 cents a pound, which we think is reasonable. At 2, I think is too low. It's closer to 5. Which foods can be irradiated legally? Now, that's the other problem you run into as an engineer, because there's all kinds of these esoteric rules about food that you have to do or you can't do. So right now, the only foods that we can legally irradiate to kill bacteria are your fresh ground meats and your frozen meats and poultry. And we can also irradiate fish. The reason I'm saying that we can kill bacteria, it takes 3 kilogray, which is the same thing as 300 kilorad. Is that right? Yeah. 3 kilogray to kill a bacterium that we want to kill. So right now, whole fruits and vegetables are approved at less than 1 kilogray. That kills insects. It was approved back in the 1970s for that, for killing insects. But it won't touch the bacteria. That's the problem with that. So we've got to get those products approved. We can't even legally sell people right now fruit and vegetables that have been irradiated to kill salmonella or listeria. We can't sell hot dogs, which has been the big recall problem that's been irradiated because they haven't been approved. The petition is very close to being approved. It takes 3 years to fast-track this through FDA. This is fast-tracking. So from the time a petition is made in order to use irradiation for a food product, it takes 3 years before it's approved. So, that means we got time to do some of the research that needs to get done. The special challenge that we have with food irradiation is that by law, irradiation is classified as a food additive. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense, does it? And under regulation of these products, the Food and Drug Administration regulates most foods, except for meats. The U.S. Department of Agriculture is in charge of the regulation of meats, poultry, eggs, things that come from animals. And they don't agree on anything, those two agencies. They are in totally different Department of State. One's the Department of Agriculture, one's the Department of Health and Human Services. They do not agree on anything. But the problem that we have is food is adulterated if the legal limits of a food additive are not met. So if we have too much irradiation in that food product, then that product is adulterated. And if we have too little, then the food is also adulterated because it develops the bacteria, which are considered an adulterant. So when we talk about small limits, which are permitted, for example, if we say that 7 kilograms are max for frozen meat, if we go above 7 kilograms, that food has to be destroyed. Can't even be fed to animals. For fresh meats, it has to be between 3 and 4.5. Of course, right now it has to be less than 1 for spices and fresh fruits and vegetables. And as I said before, you've got to have 3 kilograms per pathogens. So you've got some very narrow ranges to work with there. Do we have dosimeters that can pick up those ranges? I don't think so. And then look at the shape of foods. This is a good example because we grow it in manure. And obviously manure is going to have some interesting things in it. Imagine trying to irradiate this product and then getting an even dose in every part of that product. With E-beam. Now with gamma, it wouldn't be a big problem. But with E-beam, what happens? The second that the electrons hit the surface and interact with food components, and immediately under the surface of the product, the dose is actually going to go above whatever the surface dose is. And then as you penetrate into the product, the dose is going to gradually decrease. And eventually, if it's a thick enough or a big enough product, you're not going to have much of anything at the center of the product. How do you do a dose for that product then? That's why we need engineers who can model these things. And food comes in lots of shapes and sizes. And they also come in lots of different compositions. To further complicate our problem is the composition of a food affects the survival of bacteria. In a food like ice cream, which has a lot of fat, the bacteria survive much better under irradiation than they do in a food like the apple, which has a lot of acid and an aqueous environment. So you don't just have the engineering parts going on, you've also got the microbiological things going on that are interacting with the food composition. That's why we have to do each other. So here's our problem. Just basically, Dr. Peavy and several of us put in a proposal on this recently. Energy disperses too quickly if our food is thick. The dose uniformity throughout foods is a problem, depending on the shape, the geometry, the composition. And of course, food composition also affects bacteria. And then we've also got this other little problem with foods is they got to taste good. So we also have to monitor the chemical changes in those foods because we get formation of free radicals at certain levels. And if the food is perfectly safe but it's inedible, nobody buys it. So to be successful here in this particular arena with food safety, this is my last slide. What I think is that, and I think our proposal that we just put together does this, you have to have a good understanding of the food production and processing system. You've got to know what's going on in that system, how it works, the distribution, the logistics of it. Because unless you understand about these small processors and the hundreds of thousands of them, their needs, then you're kind of working out in an aside place. And also we have to be aware of national research priorities in food safety, which change every year, and especially this year with administration change. And also each agency has its own priorities, so we have to be very aware of those. We have to follow instructions on these proposals explicitly. If you do a proposal and use the wrong summary form or the wrong cover sheet, they don't even review it. They just throw it in the garbage. They'll never even write you. They just simply throw it in the garbage. And well, I've been panel chairing, that's why I know these things. And that's what I was told to do, so I did it. And finally, the thing that we're funding is multidisciplinary type research. It's very favorably funded, and the more creative it is, the more novel it is the more likely it's going to be funded. So that's why I think that I think we're ahead of the game at this point. No one else has really thought about these things. And I really attribute this to Dan and compliment him on getting us thinking about this. Is that Other people are irradiating food, so they're not thinking about these problems with geometry and with E-beam penetration, and perhaps some of the modeling that you also do. So please feel free to contact me, and we'd love to work with you.
Let's express our appreciation. Okay, we'll have time for a few questions. I have a question. The 9,000 deaths, is that just in the United States?
Just the United States.
So worldwide it would be enormous.
It's incredible worldwide. Many developing countries, the death rate in young children is just beyond comprehension.
I assume that mad cow disease is very difficult considering research on it. Certainly one of the most frightening things that I've seen. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my son's going to Italy next week, and I told him to stay away from the hamburger. They've had 80 deaths in Italy right now due to mad cow disease, or 80 cases. We are not set up to work with mad cow disease. It's caused by something called a prion, which is not a bacterium, it's not a virus, it's basically a protein. And I don't want it in my lab.
Well, if we get it in the country, it's going to be
It's going to be a very, very serious problem if we get it in this country.
Michael?
Just curious, what do you think about organic foods? Like the wrong way to go?
Well, organic is grown generally with less supervision, less intervention. You have more bacterial pathogens on those because the fact that you tend to have more damage to those foods, from insects and so forth. So organic is great if you want to try to reduce your pesticide inputs. They're not great if you want to eat a safe food supply because the bacterial pathogens in those are much higher. The pesticides are not a high-risk problem in this country.
Grants that you're pursuing right now, you mentioned you've already turned in $6 million worth of grants. Are those mostly still to government agencies, or are you actually looking at the private industry to provide a sizable fraction?
We're looking at lots of different things.
All kinds.
Everything. We're putting together consortiums of companies that are paying fees to go on. I'm trying to set up an irradiation facility where I've got a membership going for $20,000 a year for big food companies, so they can come in and try stuff. We've got gifts going on at this company out in West Tennessee. It's going to give us $250,000 just because they think what we're doing is nice. So there's a lot of I will never tell. United States. So there's lots of different. I'm taking money anywhere I can get it. It doesn't fit in here.
And then you mentioned also about national priorities. Are there indeed certain particular foods that are very much on the top of the list right now in the national sense, like is beef on the top of the list, or is there one particular category that is?
It really does change, and for like 1 year it was beef because of the outbreak of E. coli with hamburger. Then it switched to fruits and vegetables the following year, and then last year it was food at the production level, like at the farm to the processing plant. This year the focus was on in food, but at the processing plant. What can you do there to stop the problem? So every year they change their focus, and you better know what the focus is, or you might as well save some time, not write a proposal.
Do you have to process external and natural whether to research?
What I indicated was that we're going to be channeling those through the center, and so the center will be channeling those into the Institute of Agriculture Grants and Contracts Office. It will expedite the process. They can normally turn them around there in about 3 hours.
I can't office of research.
Right. Because they've got 23,000 people here on the campus, and we've only got, about 2,500 out there they deal with.
Let me make one comment before we close. She mentioned the longer shelf life. I believe it's true that 75% of food stuff in the third world, countries, continents like Africa, spoils before it can be eaten. And we all want to see on TV the number of people that die by starvation each year. And So food mitigation has the potential to increase the shelf life for these third world countries and thereby save thousands, maybe millions of lives. Now, that's something that an engineer in general, and a nuclear engineer in particular, is really good. Not die, okay? So let's express our appreciation again. Everyone's invited for refreshments down on the second floor. Thank you.